Hey everyone, Andy here. So about halfway through this episode, before we get to spoilers, the episode's going to break to a interview I did with friend of the podcast, Megan, about The Invisible Man, since it felt kind of weird to have one man talk about a movie that is so focused on the female experience. So just know it'll go to an interview with Megan. We'll kind of talk about it, review it ourselves, and then go back. This will be at the spoiler mark, so yep, there it is. Have a good day, everybody.
Welcome to the Geek 101 podcast, episode 243, Invisible Man. He said that wherever I went, he would find me, walk right up to me, and I wouldn't be able to see him. I'm Ariel Rada.
And I'm Andy Bowman.
And today we are going to talk about The Invisible Man, not the original H.G. Wells story, nor the 1933 film. Instead, we're going to talk about the Blumhouse Productions 2020 film starring Elizabeth Moss, among others. But first, we have news, and Andy, this is a piece of news that is near and dear to our heart. But perhaps this particular version won't be. Why don't you tell us what it is?
Okay, we have a trailer for the delayed Artemis Fowl movie. And unfortunately, they have not put him in as a bird of some kind.
Just Artemis Fowl is like this chicken that's running around.
Quack.
Artemis Fowl was a book written by Owen Colfer back in the 2000s about a 12-year-old criminal mastermind grade A jerk. This kid, in an attempt to get power and wealth, discovers the existence of fairies and elves and other mythical creatures, and discovers their not fantastical magic world, but instead their high-tech magical world. He is thwarted by Holly Short and Commander Root and several other elves. And, you know, as he attempts to steal their gold and do them harm. In the original book, Artemis Fowl is definitely more of a villain, certainly a criminal, but not necessarily heartless. And the main character in that book you'd probably view as Captain Holly Short, the young, trailblazing female special ops member of their police force. But in this trailer, we find that Artemis Fowl is this young genius whose dad is kidnapped by the fairies, and they are trying to steal something from Artemis Fowl's ancestral home, instead making him not a criminal mastermind grade A jerk, but a heroic young boy trying to save his father and help the fairies. That was a 2-minute spiel on the differences between book and what we think the movie is. Andy, what are your thoughts in regards to these changes that they are attempting to make from book to film?
This is like the classic textbook example of sanitizing something for a younger audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put, Andy. Like we said, the characters of Artemis Fowl, or the character of Artemis Fowl is so different in how he is displayed. He is cold and cunning and ruthless, yet hesitant in what he does because of he was like raised a certain way, but he might have this kind-heartedness to him that you get peaks of every now and then through the book. But that seems to be all out the window in this particular adaptation.
Yeah. Ultimately, this really means that and this is all based on what we saw in the trailer. It could be theoretically completely different, but that's probably not going to be the case. If Artemis Fowl's character arc has to do with him starting out as being pretty much just a little and and he needs to be a piece of so that he can grow and adopt and he goes from being the aggressor to doing other things, and he's always just kind of mischievous. He has, the ability to do some real crimes. And this looks like he's kind of being sought out as a chosen one. So it feels a lot more like, tonally the movie feels like the first two Harry Potter movies. So, hey, cool. If you're 11 years old, I'm sure you're going to like this movie.
It also feels a lot like that Wrinkle in Time movie from a few years ago.
Oh, man. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
I didn't watch it, but that movie looked like it wasn't sure what it really wanted to be. That book is largely impossible to adapt the way that things are written and described in it. This movie's not that, or Artemis Fowl. This property is not that. They're really fundamentally misunderstanding what the characters are about, and I'm sure you'll find think pieces and things when the movie comes out and getting into it. But ultimately, if we were going to look at this from an adaptation standpoint, Andy, when we were referring to, it would absolutely flunk that whole spiritual adaptation aspect of it.
Right. Based solely on this trailer and totally not overreacting or diving too far into it, it does not resonate with the tone of the books, and that's a shame. This trailer really turned me off of watching this movie.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you there. One of the things that is really frustrating is that Holly Short seems to be just some side character in this. But like I said, she's one of the, she is the co-star, right? The co-main character of that book. Her status as this woman trailblazer.
She has an arc.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She's got a big arc, and she is the first woman in their police force's millennial history, right? Centuries long history. To become a police officer, and that's really important for how she is treated by both her superiors and her peers. But in the movie, her direct superior, Commander Root, is played by Judi Dench, completely removing all of that character development from the book. It's a baffling decision.
Well, maybe Ariel, Judi Dench is playing more of a Tilda Swinton in Doctor Strange type character.
No, I don't think so.
I
don't think. Why? Why do that? I mean,
I don't. I mean, just for the name Judi Dench.
That name certainly has less cachet.
Star of the movie Cats, Ariel, which by the way comes out on VOD soon, so you can expect at least me to do a solo episode.
Sure. I will not. I don't understand your need to watch bad things. I have no time to watch bad things. Speaking of this is why perhaps you and I will not watch this. Maybe we'll just read the book at some point before the movie comes out and just talk about that. So we're both not super excited about this. Andy, what do you think of Kenneth Branagh's previous works?
So I really enjoy a lot of his previous works. Murder on the Orient Express was a lot of fun, which I didn't know the twist, and I know it's a classic, but I went in not knowing how it would end, so I really enjoyed that. I liked Thor 1. I thought it was a perfectly good movie. I know, Ariel, you don't feel nearly as positively about Thor, and no. I can get that. I can understand. I love his role in the second Harry Potter movie, which we talked about a little bit, but
he's
for the
good
most,
in that.
Yeah, he's perfect. For the most part, let's see here. His Cinderella was fine. And I saw his Hamlet, and I thought that was pretty good too.
Okay. Did you hear that the person they wanted originally for that character he played in the Harry Potter film, whose name escapes me?
Gilderoy Lockhart?
Yeah, was the actor they wanted at first was Hugh Grant. Which takes a little bit of shine off Kenneth Branagh.
Poor Kenneth Branagh. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Yeah, I'm just pretty like, okay, cool. Artemis Fowl might be fine. I was a little bit more hopeful before it was delayed. Now seeing this delay in the second trailer and seeing that they probably are going to be blending two books together instead of just doing the first one. Yeah, that's the other thing, right? The first book would be great to be like, a 90-minute movie. This blending these two together, I don't know. I don't know if Disney is full-heartedly committed to this now or not.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you there. Okay, let's move on to our main topic today. We are going to talk about is it Blumhouse film, Andy?
Universal and Blumhouse together.
Universal and Blumhouse. Okay, the current reboot of The Invisible Man. So this is another thing to talk about in terms of our adaptations, but we will talk about the movie on the whole. I did not watch it. I kind of know about everything that happens. This is not I didn't watch it because I heard it was bad. This was I didn't watch it because I have no time. So Andy, tell us the thoughts about your movie, and then we'll talk about a little the adaptation aspect of it.
Okay, Ariel. I had a spiel planned at the beginning where I was going to be describing this movie as very weird, and how it's weird that it starts with the antagonist, and it just focuses on this antagonist, and that the hero is going to get revenge on her. But since you didn't see it, I don't think that would fly. You being the woman hater you are, probably think that is the plot of this movie. But this movie is it's essentially a ghost story. It is a movie about a woman who was in a very bad relationship. I think that it's kind of implied that this is essentially the sequel to 50 Shades of Grey. This is where 50 Shades of Grey ends up.
Okay, yeah, I could see that.
And because he's a rich inventor, he controls her, and the opening scene has her leaving him. She has drugged him. She is terrified of her life, and it's shot in such a beautiful way that it never outright says what she went through with him. The movie only has one scene where they actually really discuss the kind of trauma that she goes through, but even then they don't really dive into it, and you don't need to dive into this trauma to understand where she's coming from. And early on, it's just very clear that this is a bad relationship. She gets out. She gets the news that he has killed himself. And then after that, weird things start happening. Very disturbing things. And it's a big question. And when I say it's a big question, I mean it's a question for the characters. For the audience, I think it's pretty clear that she's not crazy, that there is an invisible man around her.
Yeah, so from what I understand, this seems to be a really interesting use of a branded name and classic story to twist it in a modern way to be really, really socially relevant, in terms of, they have this woman and she's in this abusive relationship, like you said, and the invisible man is terrorizing her, right? This isn't really a spoiler. This is just conceptually, and nobody believes her. Nobody believes that the abuse is happening. Nobody believes that the abuse is still happening, and people are not, are just taken to account, are falling prey to the power dynamics that exist both in this film and in real life to discredit what this woman is trying to tell them. And now this is an extreme example, right? In terms of, because here's this guy committing these crimes and stalking her, whatever, but he's literally invisible. But it is just it's essentially, of course, I don't know firsthand. It's how women feel when they say he abuses me, he does this, but since you can't see it, you cannot physically see the abuse happening, they are less inclined to believe it. But it does, from the character's perspective and from the audience's perspective, we both know it to be true. And it's such an interesting thing. I hate talking about the quote unquote Me Too movement. It's just a nice little bow and a branding to put on something that is like this awful situation that has happened and is still actively happening. And so you cannot say in the era of Me Too, there was no everything is happening. And it is interesting that like a movie like this comes out. I'm glad it's coming out now. In this quote unquote movement. Obviously we can do more, but I do like the kind of switch of narrative in regards to it. Andy, do you know anything about the original The Invisible Man?
Yes, I believe the director is John Whalen. I've seen it a long time ago, and it does make sense. It is about a guy who is driven to murderous actions. And I remember thinking that it was kind of cool. I also read the H.G. Wells story that it was based on, and I really like that as well, which is a little bit more sci-fi-y. I'm not like intimately familiar with it, but the Invisible Man was one of the universal monsters. The Invisible Man is a kind of a classic movie monster, movie villain. And
with the bandages and the glasses and stuff and the hat.
Right. And there's a brief visual reference to this, which you can see in the trailers. The trailers pretty much show everything that could be interesting in the movie. So the trailers would fail our little trailer framework we worked on a few months ago. But this movie. First and foremost, it is treated like a ghost story. It takes a long time to get going, and Lee Wanell, the director, is actually willing to just kind of let the camera sit by itself for a little while, let the camera stay on an empty room, and in doing so, maybe something's going to move, and it doesn't always move, right? There isn't always something that you can see happening. Another thing here, I'm just going to tell you, there's a scene in the trailer where she says there's someone sitting in the chair, and you can see the imprint in the chair, Ariel.
Okay, yeah.
That's not in the movie.
Okay. That's because that's a little too like on the nose, maybe.
Right. It's way too on the nose. Here, like this is the thing, and of course, as a white man, I'm definitely comfortable and expert on talking about this. So one of the things is none of the characters ever they always placate her. They listen to her, but they never really hear her. They never do anything to just confirm, right? Like if there's an invisible guy in the room, you'd almost figure like, oh, just waving your hand around, maybe you'd bump into him. They never do anything like that. They don't even try to confirm this. They just sit here like, okay, you're you're not crazy. And this movie is essentially Gaslight the movie. Like,
right.
Just the way it very slowly builds up. I really enjoyed this because I like haunted house movies, right? And this is almost a haunted house movie, at least the first half, where something's going on. It's slow. It's deliberate. It's building up to something. Little things are happening, but maybe they're not really happening. This movie really excels at that. The pervasive feeling that this man can be anywhere and you don't know. And it makes you tense for the character. Elizabeth Moss plays an amazing... Elizabeth Moss's version of Cecilia is done so well. It's done to the point where she walks this line between being like not clearly sane, but also definitely not crazy.
So you're telling me that Elizabeth Moss leaves a fortified building owned by a rich and powerful entity, and after she leaves, she is followed by something or someone that she cannot see and is affecting her family members, cutting her off from society, and effectively controlling her life from the shadows, even though she is trying to leave this shadowy entity. Are you catching my drift here, Andy?
No, I am not. What movie are you referencing?
I'm not referencing a movie. Elizabeth Moss is a Scientologist.
What? No. Oh. Oof. All
right, let's double check that.
Please.
I'll double check that in real time. But that'd be amazing. Yeah. Oh man. She is in fact a Scientologist. I nailed it, Andy. I nailed it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, you know what? This makes sense. This makes so much sense.
This is a cry for help, Andy.
Yes. Ariel, this is like a movie where like also I need to tell you it's much more a thriller than a horror movie. I really think it's much more a thriller. Lee Wanell does get to do one really interesting action sequence where you can see it in the trailer, and you get to see a little bit of his upgrade. Because he directed that movie Upgrade.
Right.
Yeah, you get to see a little bit of that shine through.
Yeah, and if you watch Upgrade, you'll know exactly what happens in Bloodshot. But go on.
Bloodshot comes out I think in 2 weeks, Ariel.
Yep.
Two whole weeks. It's gonna be great. But I really encourage everyone to go see this movie. It resonated with me very well, really well. And it's just one of those movies that kind of came out of nowhere, and me and Ariel both had a bit of a busy week, and this was a great chance to just do a quick episode and kind of talk about it. All right. We're here with friend of the podcast, Megan, because since Ariel hasn't seen this movie, and I feel like maybe, just maybe, it might be important to talk to a woman about this, and maybe, just maybe, it's better if it's not just one dude talking about
I'm
this
here. I've seen it. I am a woman. I have thoughts. No, I'm just kidding.
So, Megan, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. What were your spoiler-free thoughts about The Invisible Man?
Yeah, I really liked it. I think I didn't have huge expectations going into it. I had seen the trailers and I thought they looked interesting, but I was like, oh, okay, Invisible Man seems like a pretty straightforward premise. I'll probably see it just because I see a lot of things, but I wasn't like running out to the theater. But once it started getting pretty good reviews and a lot of people were talking about it, I was like, okay, I'm going to go check it out. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, I think Elizabeth Moss is a really great actress. There's a lot of, movies in recent years that I've really liked her in. And, I think while there was probably some schlocky horror aspects of this on paper, I think she really elevates it. She's excellent in it. It's high level Invisible Man thoughts.
Yeah. That's a pretty good overview of it. I really thought it was good. Going into it a little bit further, like the way that the film is shot in general, it's shot in such a way where you're always looking in the background, and the background is always there for you to look into and see if maybe something's going to move or...
Yes. You're very hyper aware because you're like, I found myself, especially at the beginning, I was like, if there's curtains in the background, I'm watching to see if the curtains are like moving. And if there's, drawers that could be opening or shutting, I'm like really paying attention to see if there's any invisible nonsense happening out of the main frame. But by the end, I feel like you do kind of, considering I'm spending a lot of the movie looking all on the corners of the screen, Elizabeth Moss really draws you into the middle.
Yeah. And also the camera isn't just afraid to just kind of stay on empty space, knowing that you're going to be looking at it while Elizabeth Moss is out of the room. And it was super tense, but also like something doesn't always happen. So it's really, really, it's just tense and paranoid, right?
Yeah, I loved a lot of the stuff like that you were talking about. So there's some times where you are kind of getting walked through the house and you're not following anyone, but you could see if there were an actor, this is how they would be taking you through the house until they got to wherever the characters were. So it's kind of all paced as if, you're always wondering where this person is. And, at different points in the movie, you see Elizabeth Moss interacting with the air, nothing. And, it's kind of everyone's worst fear, I think.
It's really kind of shot like a ghost story, right? Like,
yes.
It's, man. Yeah. And, Elizabeth Moss, Ariel just dropped this bomb on me. Did you know she's a Scientologist?
Yes, it's really problematic. Right. But it's really problematic, I know, but she is good. So I don't know how to reckon with that.
Yeah. It's just like, oh, your entire organization does this to people constantly.
Yeah. And she's in a lot of movies about like gaslighting, and I'm like, I don't know if this is self-aware or like what this is. Very confusing for me.
Maybe this is her cry for help.
Yes. She's become a very good, scream queen. I think about, did you see Us?
Yeah. Oh.
Very creepy Us scenes. And then I also really liked her last year in Her Smell. She kind of plays.
Yes. Spoiler alert. That's my homework for this episode.
Oh, spoiler. I loved Her Smell. I mean, I think a lot of people who saw it were like, that was 3 hours and a nightmare for me. And I was like, yeah, isn't that great?
Exactly.
They're like, that was a fever dream and I felt like I had sweats after. I'm like, I know, right?
Yeah. And, God, man, the name of Her Smell is just the worst.
Oh my gosh, it's disgusting to say.
Yeah. I have trouble like recommending it to people because I'm like, listen, I know what the words are going to come out of my mouth. But one, it's kind of important to the movie in a very nice way. But two, this is the title. Yes.
And also, you might not have a good time, but it's like a great movie, which is a hard sell.
Yeah. It's, oh man, I thoroughly enjoyed it. But going back to Invisible Shenanigans and what I believe is the real sequel to 50 Shades of Grey.
This, I love that. I think so. I mean, I assume the reason, that you wanted to have a woman to come talk about this is because as much as this isn't like an allegory movie, I think if you told me there was going to be an Invisible Man movie, like in the past couple of years, I feel like what's been really hot is like, oh, but it's all kind of a metaphor, or it's in your mind, or it's supernatural. And the movie, is pretty tangible. I don't want to get too far into spoilers, but it is kind of a metaphor for an abusive man that she can't escape from. And she's, cried. I mean, we said cry for help. There's everyone in her life she's trying to reach out to and grab onto. And her ex-husband or her husband won't let her go.
Yeah. So we'll just go ahead and just dive right into spoilers. I'm placing this segment between the non-spoiler part of the episode and then the spoiler part. So,
perfect.
Yeah, you guys will get to hear us talk about spoilers and then cut back to Ariel finding out about how the movie goes. So one of the things that I say this to Ariel is that the people in her life listen to her, but they never believe her. Right?
Yes.
Like if somebody tells...
They're very empathetic, but also what she's saying is crazy.
Right. But it's also like if somebody tells me there's an invisible person in this room, instead of being like, oh, okay, yes, I understand. There are small tests to do to confirm this, and they never do any of these things.
I kept wondering why they weren't like, I was like, you should like shake flour around the room. Like, you should, later on they go outside in the rain and you can see that the rain is falling on a human being. I mean, if someone told me there's an invisible person in the room, that might not be my first instinct, but if someone is maintaining there's an invisible man in the room, I'd be like, okay, well, let's swing a bat around and see what happens.
Right. And it really made me like start thinking about how I actually listen to the women in my life, because there's this, yes, they're hearing her, but they're not listening to what she's saying.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't believing her.
Right. So, which fits into a greater theme, I think for most women. But another thing that I was kind of thinking about was, they kind of keep talking to her really patronizingly, like, there's not an invisible person in the room. And, we, the audience, know there's an invisible person in the room. So we're constantly infuriated to be like, I understand why you wouldn't believe her because it sounds crazy. But we do know there is an invisible man in the room. But I was thinking they keep kind of talking to her very calmly, like she's a child. And I was like, even if, you're putting a child to bed and they're like, there's a monster in the closet, you would open the closet door and be like, see, no monster. And I was like, let's prove there's no invisible man then. Yeah.
And one of the other things, and, one of the reasons why I definitely want to make sure to talk about a woman, because this with a woman, because I feel like, as a white dude, I can project a lot of my thoughts into this, but I don't know if the movie handles it well. And one of the things that the movie does, and I appreciate, is it lets us know very early on, yes, there is an invisible man here. Like the scene with the blanket coming off of her while she's sleeping.
Yes. That's like the first time that we're confirmed. So you either have to be like, because at the beginning you're like, oh, well, maybe she's an unreliable narrator and, it's going to be kind of ambiguous whether there's an invisible man. But that's the first time where she feels confirmed there is an invisible man. And we also, the audience, know that there is, because it feels very real and like heavy to have the footsteps on the blanket and you see him walking up the blanket and you're like, oh God, no. So that was also when I got kind of excited, because I was like, oh, it's a real invisible man.
Yeah. Well, it's always a bit of a thing where it's like, oh man, if she's an unreliable narrator, what does that say about this movie? And
right. That would be, I think that'd be a huge mistake. So I'm glad they didn't do it. But, and I think the other thing that I really appreciated about this movie is so the only time you really see her interacting with the husband as like a human and not an invisible man is at the very beginning and at the very end. In the very beginning, you see her sneaking around the house, like preparing to leave him. And you feel scared because you know that she's worried that he's going to wake up. So we don't need any background. Like, I feel like a lot of worse movies would show him being abusive or have her be really bruised or beat up and like have it be really obvious that there had been, domestic abuse there. And all they need to show you is this really tense exit scene. And by the time she makes it to the road and he is chasing after her, you like understand the whole past of this relationship where you're like, she has got to get out of there. And it isn't gratuitous. I think a lot of people would be really, would just show it, and that can be, not great.
Yeah, because there's an implication when you show it that it's like it has to be a certain level of abuse to warrant this reaction from her. And we don't need to see that. We don't need to know the details. There's that scene where she's kind of telling her sister and the police officer that he hit her and some other things, and that's it. That's all we really need to know.
Yep. You just need to know that this is how scared of him that she is, that he is possessive enough to follow her into the street and bust through the window, and then that can be the end of it.
Yeah. Ah, man. I really loved how the opening scene, it's very clear, like, okay, yeah, she's leaving a relationship. Oh, he's such a control freak. There's all these cameras everywhere. And you never have to like entertain or think about it. It's just kind of telling you without telling you at all.
Yeah. And I also just love that house. So that whole opening scene where you're really tense and she's like sneaking around this amazing house on the cliffside, I was like, this is just really my shit.
This is a great house. I would totally live here.
Oh my God, that house is incredible. Later on, she goes back to the house and you're kind of like, oh, I don't know if you should go deal with your demons right now. But also I was like, oh yay, the house in daylight. We get to see the house now.
Okay. So Megan likes a little bit of a modern architecture style.
Yeah, I mean, I like any like real estate, Parasite last year, great house. Oh, Star is Born, great house.
Okay. So basically, something like what is it, Monster House, right? Did you like that?
Monster House, interesting house, not a great house, but still engaging.
Okay. What about Iron Man?
Ooh, okay. So a little too sleek for me, maybe. I that's very like rounded corners. I prefer sharp edges.
Okay. Yeah. You want there to be sharp edges in case any Invisible Man ever comes in. You can always just like trip.
Push him.
Yeah. Okay. I get you. So the score in this movie also, like, it barely exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really like, that was really gripping to me, is that there wasn't really a score until it was needed.
Yeah, I felt myself holding my breath a lot, and it kind of reminded me, the first half had a very similar feel for me as A Quiet Place. I mean, not directly, because A Quiet Place is so sound-based, but in the same way that you're kind of hyper aware of everything that could be happening, anything she's going to be doing that could affect where he's standing in the room. So, I don't know. It's interesting.
Also, Are you happy that they did not include that part of the movie that was in the trailer where she says there's somebody sitting in that chair?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a little on the nose, which I understand gets you in the door. And I think I saw Jason Blum was responding on Twitter to people saying that the trailer pretty much gave the whole movie away. Which, I mean, it's one of those things where you're like, okay, well, if we're accepting there's an invisible man, I didn't expect the ending exactly how it went. So, I know we're going to get into spoilers, but I didn't need the chair scene, but I did like anytime that she was interacting directly with him. And like, so there's a time where she's sitting in her room on the floor and you can kind of, in your head, he's standing in the doorway or he's sitting in the chair and she's sitting on the bed. I liked all that stuff because, I don't know, it's interesting. And then the other thing that's kind of crazy is, I mean, he's the Invisible Man, but at the very end, you see the actor who plays her husband, who's been the Invisible Man this whole time. And you're like, oh, it's just a guy, Like, now that I see what he looks like, it feels so unexciting.
Yeah. And there's also this kind of through line when you find out that she is pregnant, and I don't talk with Ariel about this at all, so spoiler alert for the episode, guys. This never comes up. You find out that she is pregnant, and I like how you find out, and I like the little Chekhov's gun earlier on where she says, like, when he wanted to have a baby, that's when he knew he had to leave.
Yes, and the other thing, when she's on the phone with her doctor, and her doctor says, there were drugs in your system, and that's the first time, and then she sees her pills on the counter. And so she's kind of going through a moment where she's like, oh my God, where did the pills come from? There's an invisible man. She's having this whole realization. But as she's putting the phone down, the doctor's like, and I have another thing I want to talk to you about, but I think it'd be better in person. And it gets really quiet. And I remember when that happened being like, oh, the doctor, there's more with the doctor. We'll come back to that. And then by the time they're like, she's pregnant, I'm like, I'd forgotten about the doctor thing that I made a note to come back to. So great timing.
Yeah. They definitely did a good job of like making you kind of forget about it and bringing it up at the right time.
Yeah.
Then there's this, but the whole pregnancy thing, it really becomes the only reason why she's even valuable to him is as a, the mother of his child.
Yes. She's like holding the baby hostage through herself.
Right. In her womb.
Yes. By being like, you're going to keep tormenting me, but I will kill myself and the baby if you do. And that's when I think, she kind of gets the upper hand. The part that really stresses me out is when she's in the, mental hospital, because one of my biggest fears is, this is irrational, but is being accused of a crime that I know I didn't commit and not being able to convince anyone that I didn't commit it. And so when the scene which is really well done, but when she's having dinner with her sister and you're like, oh, thank goodness she's in a crowded room full of people. This is like a safe place. And then her husband, kills her sister and frames her, and she's getting dragged into the hospital saying, I didn't do it. He's invisible. He did it. I would never do that. And they're all obviously being like, yeah, sure. And you're like, no, she would never do that. Why didn't you get this? There were other people in the restaurant. How did no one else see, the knife move on its own?
Man. Yeah, that was such an uncomfortable scene. She's talking to her sister. They're coming to a reconciliation. And then her sister believes her. I'm like, okay, no. Now she can totally tell. Oh, wait, she's dead. That she is totally just bleeding out. Okay.
And it works because I was almost when it happened, I was so surprised that I was thrilled that I was surprised. I was like, oh, I can't believe you did that. And then she's dying. And I'm like, I'm just really excited that a movie made me that surprised. So I was like, oh, that was great. I mean, terrible, obviously, but great.
Oh, man.
Because it's the first time in a while that I was like, oh my gosh, someone's listening to her. We're in a public place. This is great. We're finally moving forward. No.
Right. She's doing everything she needs to the right way.
Yes.
Oh, man. And then, the moment where she gets the pen, I really liked that. I like just showing her as being somebody who is competent and can think this through. And clearly the brother has written her off.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you think about the entire little action sequence in that hallway?
Yeah. So my first thought during the hallway was, okay, well, there's no way that someone's not going to be able to believe this because I'm sure this hallway has cameras, So I just kept thinking, okay, phew, we're not going to come out of this scene and think, okay, this must be a figment of her imagination. But I am not probably too nuanced of an action person, but I thought it was really good, entertaining. I like Invisible Man fight scenes. I mean, I'm sure it's probably not that actually high tech to shoot. I assume he's in a green suit and just they're doing regular choreography, but it does feel so exciting anytime there's a real up close brawl with them. Or, there's a time when he's pulling Aldous Hodge down the hallway in the house. And anytime that's happening, I was like, I know this isn't super, if you watch Endgame, think how much money and energy that took. This is probably a guy in Lycra, but I'm thrilled by it.
Yeah. The budget for this movie was $7 million.
Insane.
Yeah.
It looks great for $7 million. That house is probably $7 million.
Yeah. It was probably just an Airbnb. They just Airbnb'd it. And have you seen the director's other movie, Upgrade?
I have not. And I was thinking about that today because when that movie came out for months after that, a few people in my life were like, you should really watch Upgrade. And I just never got to it because sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
But I'll probably watch it now.
Yeah, same here. I just know that with Upgrade, a lot of the action is like bodies moving in a way that a body doesn't normally move.
Yes, I've seen that trailer a million times. So I know I see very distinctly in my head the scene where he's lying flat down on his back and then his body like flips up horizontally real fast. It's hard to explain, but I know a lot of people who really enjoyed that movie, and I think it was another one where people are like, oh, it's probably, probably going to be a B-, C+, and a lot of people were like, oh no, solid, really good. Yeah. So it's on my list.
Also, like each security guard, I love how there's so many security guards, they just keep coming in.
They just keep coming around the corner. And I'm like, can someone like actually do something?
And because like the suit's malfunctioning, I liked the design of the suit. Which is just this faceless black void with cameras all over it. But the guards, they come in and they know something's not right.
Right. Because she can't have just gotten out on her own. Like, I'm sure Elizabeth Moss is strong, but she's a relatively small woman.
Yeah.
And to come around the corner and see 8 people, shot on the floor and her kind of at the very end of the hallway, basically trying to run away. I don't know. There's always going to be some semi-incompetent guards in a movie.
Yeah, the line though, like when he finally like kind of gets her in the parking lot and it's raining, and he just says like, "Oh, I'm not going to kill you," because you are holding a baby hostage in your womb. Your uterus is just a hostage cell to me at this point.
Yeah.
The panic in her, the panic in her generally when she's trying to get a car to chase him down, like I thought that was really great. And just her just taking this guy's car who's like on the phone.
Yes. and then on his wife on the phone is like, "Are you okay?" And she's just like, "He's okay," and then hangs up. I'm like, very ominous.
Oh man. Yeah, I'm just thinking of like, if I was on the phone with my wife and just a woman came out, yeah, he's fine.
He's fine. Yeah, I don't think that's assuaging any fears.
And then later, after she has killed the brother, and she destroys the suit, and I love that the police officer talking to her, being like, "Okay, well, we found your husband. We found him alive, tied up. There's this thing of like, okay, we believe you, but only a little bit, because this other way explains it."
That's the whole movie. And that's one of the things I love about it is, at first they're like, okay, there's obviously not an invisible man, but so she's crazy. And then when they're like, okay, there is an invisible man, but it's not the one that you thought it was. And she's like, if you got to the point where you now realize that someone can turn themselves invisible, why would you not believe me when I tell you who it was? I'm lucky. I've never been stalked, but I believe that it's a very personal experience. And I think that you should believe someone if they're telling you they know who's doing it, especially when it's such specific tormenting. Because even for a second, I was like, are we supposed to believe it was the brother the whole time? But there are so many things that were so specific to them and, the baby and all of that. Even if the doctors are saying you are pregnant, but it's not your husband who's been doing this, I just would never believe that.
Yeah. The final scene. Let's go ahead and talk about the final. I really like this scene.
So good.
Do you want to try giving a rundown of what happens?
Yeah. So, Elizabeth Moss. So the husband who allegedly has been kidnapped this whole time is back in the house and living there. And he invites Elizabeth Moss over. Elizabeth Moss's character has a name. I'm just calling her Elizabeth Moss. But, she shows up at the house and she's, dressed to kill, and they have kind of a dinner scene and she's talking to him, and I at least was like, okay, she must be recording this because she's asking him like, I just need you to tell the truth. you've been doing this. She's really baiting him to, confess that he's been tormenting her. And he's like, no, of course not. Like, honey, you're not feeling well. This is how you get, but I know how to, I'm the only one who understands you. So it's fine. But, he won't admit to anything. She's like, okay, I'm going to go clean up because she's been crying. And when she goes to clean up, she goes and grabs the invisible suit that she had hidden away in a secret compartment earlier in the movie. You are still at the table with the husband. You see him pick up his knife and slit his throat. And then a few seconds later, you see her exit the bathroom in the clothes that she entered in. And she steps right into the camera frame and screams and cries and then calls 911. And then she steps out of the camera frame and basically looks at him like, you know what you did.
Yeah.
That's the end of the movie.
I know, right? So the sequel has to be her finding his killer, right? My interpretation was that she killed him. Yeah, no, that is what happened. But wouldn't it be great?
I was like, oh my gosh, am I losing my mind? No,
wouldn't it be great if that's like
that
the
would be
sequel?
So funny. Yeah. She's become a cop, and the case that she could never solve was who killed her own husband. It was her. Right.
It's just a twist on the O.J. Simpson story.
Yeah. I love that because also, the whole point of the movie is like no one's believing her, and she's like, I'm just gonna have to take care of things myself. And when she goes to the bathroom, I was like, I don't know where this is going exactly. But then when he picks up his knife, I was like, oh, beautiful. You love to see it. And then, her cop friend, whose name I forget now, James maybe? It's played by Aldous Hodge, kind of shows up because he was listening to her recording. And she's like, what did it sound like to you? And he's like, sounded like a suicide. She's like, yeah, it did, didn't it? So, I don't know. Satisfying ending for me.
Yeah. And one of the things that I liked when she first gets there, he is so nervous. Like he is acting so like this is that like that honeymoon period or whatever after a relationship has gone bad. Like he is acting totally innocently. It is so beautiful, and then or gross, and then when he touches her on the thigh afterwards and is like, no one knows you better than I do. And
it's so manipulative, and I feel like it's so familiar to so many people. I was like infuriated. And then the other thing that I think it was very smart. No offense to this actor. He was great, but he's not like a face that everyone knows. And I think it's like really a stroke of genius because by the end of it, you're like, this guy is such a nightmare and like so not worth her. And obviously, and then, to have her kind of have all the power in that scene, even though he's the one being really manipulative, I think it's excellently done.
Yeah. Also, for me, like when she's like watching him bleed out and she, is just looking at him, I don't sense like joy from her. I just sense relief.
Yes. Like, and also, she says that she's like, you don't understand. This will never end as long as he is alive.
Man.
It's good.
Yeah. This movie was really good. What rating would you give it?
I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, but I have a really inconsistent rating system.
Yeah. I gave it 4.5 on Letterboxd. It's been sitting with me for a few days. Like
it definitely, it's a thinker. It's one that I left and I was like, cinema. And I think I saw I did a back-to-back. I saw Invisible Man, and then immediately after I saw Call of the Wild. And I've thought of Invisible Man every day since, and I've completely forgotten almost everything about the Call of the Wild.
Oh man. Was Call of the Wild any good?
No, but it has opened a lot of discussions in my head about what I want out of CGI, and I haven't come to an answer yet, so.
The dog looks so fake, and
the dog looks really fake, but then I have been like wrestling with myself because I'm like, okay, well, in The Lion King, the animals looked real, but I didn't like it. So what I prefer, they look fake and I'm like, oh, it's like a cartoon. Like in my head, within like an hour, I was like, this is a cartoon dog. Which I'm sure they spent a lot of money for me to sit here being like, this dog's not real and never pretends to look real. But
I mean, that's the thing is, it just shouldn't have been a CGI dog. Like, a dog is the most consistent animal to be used in real life.
Right. And I mean, going back through the history of cinema, you know, dogs can do things. I mean, they don't have him do anything insane, you know, he runs, he, you know, lays down, hangs out with Harrison Ford. Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Well, I think that'll be it. Do you have anything you want to plug? I know you have at least one thing, right?
Yes, I have a podcast. It's called On the Download. We're on Twitter at On the Download Podcast. And I'm also on Twitter at SpellMegan. So, yeah, I'm very available online.
Well, thank you for coming on and confirming my thoughts on a movie about women. Because, you know.
Man's in the title, but is it really about them, you know?
Yeah. All right. You have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Yeah. So let's get now into spoilers in regards to this modernization of the Invisible Man. What were your thoughts on changing the science behind the Invisible Man from guy takes magic potion to inventor creates like special invisible suit?
Okay. I actually really like that. And one of the things that's really cool about the way the suit is designed, you know, this is a movie made for $7 million. This suit is really cool in its design. It essentially has a ton of just small cameras on it that are all in a like a what do they call it? It's a six hex, right?
Okay.
Hexagonal shapes, and they're very small and just kind of all over this entire suit. And if you've played Metal Gear Solid or Overwatch, the suit itself looks like either Genji or Gray Fox.
Okay.
Like the suit itself, the only times you see it after Elizabeth Moss damages it. Really cool. Really, really great job. But for the most part, you really don't see it. But the if we ever do make something like this, an invisible suit, this is kind of how it would function scientifically speaking. So I like this.
Yeah, I think it's smart because it is such a simpler buy-in, such an easier buy-in, right, for the audience to say, oh, this guy made this suit that has cameras and like holograms in a sense, or cameras and screens, or cameras and whatever.
Right. And when Elizabeth Moss actually sees it for the first time, when she gets to, you know, when she goes back into his house after he is dead and goes in the closet and kind of sees that she's being recorded from something but can't see it, and she manages to turn the suit off. The like the individual cameras move and there's all these whirring sounds. It's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also the sound design in this movie is amazing. It does not have a very strong score. The score is barely ever there. It's just quiet, and you often are alone with Elizabeth Moss.
Yeah, I also like that the way that she is, from what I've read about the script and blah blah blah, the way that she is reacted to by everyone, right? Not just men, but like men and women and family members and whatnot. She is so ingrained and traumatized by this abusive relationship that it almost defines who she is. And in the trailer, you see that he has such a stronghold on her in this abusive relationship that he does define who she is and how she dresses and how she acts and how she thinks. It is so, it's such a reflection of real life. And it certainly is something that you can see happen. Like if some guy did develop the technology for the invisible suit, whatever, it is absolutely something that would happen, or that could. I don't know, would, but that could happen, right?
Yeah, man, and early on, the opening scene is her escaping from this, and the way it opens up, it shows you that she has drugged him with diazepam. And as she's going through this big, sparse house, she's turning off all these security cameras. And you realize that she was a prisoner. And it's really well done. But once she gets to her sister's friend's house, she won't leave the house. And this character, her sister's friend, is a cop. And there's this great scene where she kind of starts to go out to just to go outside for once in 2 weeks. And the way the camera's moving around, it's mimicking like your neck moving around, like looking at everything. And then all of a sudden a runner, someone just going out for a jog, runs by her, and she like runs back inside, and she's scared. And the cop says, "You know what? That's the furthest you've been in 2 weeks." To me, that's the equivalent of you walking in the moon. And it's very efficient in letting us know just how bad it is for her, just how scared she is.
Yeah. But like I said before, in regards to the upgrade in the technology, I think it is, for me, anytime that they're like, yeah, this guy turns himself invisible, but he's got to take his clothes off and he's got to wear glasses and blah, blah, blah. It's such a scientific leap to think that somebody can figure out like what to do with that. But the ability to create holograms so that you are seeing something else, it's like I said, it's way simpler, much easier to buy into. I do like the fact that you mentioned that nobody even bothers to check on whether or not what she's saying is true, right? I think that is key for this movie's success, because if a sane, rational person, if Amanda came up to me or my brother came up to me and was like, dude, I think someone's following me, and I think they're invisible. Well, like the first thing I would do is like pick up a stick and wave it around or try to splash water on things, right? But she has gotten to a point where he has had so much control over her that she can't be like trusted to think and act like a rational person. So therefore nobody treats her like she's thinking and acting like a rational person. And without that, the movie doesn't work. Too many audience members, I think, would be taken out of it. And we're just like, well, why don't you just, for lack of an better example, because this isn't in the movie, right? With the chair, when she's like, oh, is somebody sitting in that chair? Obviously, was like, well, let's put something on that chair.
Yeah. It's just never that. It's never obvious that there's someone there, right? The big moments where he like really gaslights her. One is when he turns the gas on the stove up so the baking catches fire. And there's another moment where she is an architect and she's going for a job interview, and she has her portfolio, and when she gets to the job, it's empty. There's another moment where he also drugs her with diazepam, and that's when it really starts to dawn on her that she isn't that he's still alive. And when the big reveal comes that, and this is the closest thing to a twist, and it's the most obvious twist, period, that it is not in fact him, but his brother.
Right.
When that's revealed, it makes a lot of sense. There's a conversation earlier where she goes to the brother who's his lawyer and tells him, just get him to stop. And her brother says, look, he controlled me too. Don't let him control you. Don't bring him back to life by imagining his ghost everywhere. And it's just another great example of her being gaslit, right? Because he knows.
Yeah.
He knows it's him or it's Griffin. And then the hilarious scene where they find Griffin after she kills the brother there's this great action sequence in a hospital where security guards keep coming. They keep coming and they know something's not right. These security guards are like kind of figuring out. They're like, okay, this lady could not have done that because she's on the other side. And they're trying to figure it out. And they're also afraid of her, but they don't know what's going on. And they just all get taken out. And it's a really well done action sequence, especially considering that kind of like an Upgrade where there's a lot of movements that don't make sense because the bodies aren't moving the way that bodies move by themselves.
Yeah, I've heard that the use of negative space is really what makes the film so great to watch. I do like your point on it being a ghost story, but without it, right? Like we know what it is. We know it's not a ghost story, and it makes it so much more, in a weird way, so much more believable for the character, right?
Right.
So yeah.
I have a friend he's in the process of leaving a terribly abusive relationship. And his wife was just incredibly manipulative toward him. And I told him like he needs to go see this movie as a form of like catharsis, because when people start questioning their own sanity, like that's scary. And the ultimate like ending of this movie where no one believes her. Even after they find him still alive and they find the suit, they don't believe her that it was Griffin. They're like, well, it was the brother. The brother was wearing the suit. The suit no longer works because she shot it multiple times. And so the police officer's like, look, we don't have any evidence it was him. We're going to have to let this go. And it was so frustrating because all the evidence has finally lined up. She brings the evidence that she was not crazy, and people are still telling her, well, that view's wrong.
Yeah. It's certainly a great commentary on a lot of very, very prominent things that are happening today. Is there anything else about the movie that you wanted to mention before we move on?
Yeah. The last scene, when she goes back to Griffin to eat dinner and ostensibly to record him admitting everything. She goes in, and the actor they got to play him is so good at being like nervous. He's acting just like her. And there's this scene where he like tells her like, I understand what you think happened. It didn't happen. And I'm the only one who knows you and who understands what it's like to feel like you're going crazy sometimes. And she goes and kills him in a beautiful way, where she could never ever get blamed for this. And the look on her face, though, is she takes no pleasure in this. She is finally getting relief seeing him bleed out in front of her. And it was a really powerful sequence, and it just really left a lot with me. Please go see this movie, guys. It's really good. Even if you don't like horror movies, it's not a horror movie. It's not really a jump scare movie. It's just a tense well done movie.
All right. Andy, what would you grade the 2020 remake of The Invisible Man?
I'd give it just a straight A. It does have a few pacing problems, but overall, for what it's doing and what it's doing with horror and using horror as a way to comment on not only on our world, but just on things that people go through, and it uses it so well. This movie is just, it's really good. And this is what horror movies should do. They should speak to something bigger than just a monster, right, Ariel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to have, in terms of especially horror movies and science fiction specifically, right? These two very specific genres that have a history in being societal commentaries. I think it is important to have those in the modern day, because if you are trying to just relay the horror and violence of something without relaying it to a real life experience or real life example, most of the time you tend to fall short. You have the original, right? Friday the 13th. You have the original, Nightmare on Elm Street. You have things like that, which are so impactful and, have the backstory of generational sin or being afraid to sleep or, outdated views of morality and stuff like that in terms of those particular horror things. But then as soon as you move away from that and you're just trying to make horror movies to make money, that's when we ended up getting all this garbage. And so for something like The Invisible Man to kind of go back to that sci-fi horror aspect, sci-fi thriller aspect, the worst horrors, the most impactful horrors are the ones that you can see reflected in real life in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, that's Andy's review of his guided review of The Invisible Man. Andy, do we know what we're doing next week?
I believe we're going back to our supernatural spring theme and finally covering Lock and Key.
Yes, we'll be covering Lock and Key,
which I have thoughts about.
Oh yeah, we've plenty of thoughts on them. All right, let's get out of here. But before that, we do have homework. Andy, what is your homework for this week?
Okay, my homework for this week is another movie starring Elizabeth Moss that is very good. I am so sorry because this is just the worst title for a movie. The movie is called Her Smell.
Okay, elaborate on what that movie is.
The movie is essentially it's about a rock star. We're gonna go. It's pretty much an all-female version of the Ramones.
Okay,
and it is just about Elizabeth Moss as this punk rock supposedly icon in the late 80s, early 90s, or early 80s, late 90s. It takes place over the course of a couple years, and it's just dealing with her going through sobriety and a few other issues. It's distilled. It is the best version of this artistic person who has a substance issue and is trying to get over it, kind of thing. If you are a fan of punk rock, the Ramones, the Clash, etc., please watch this movie. It was really good, and I'm just so sorry. It has a terrible name. I mean, can you imagine going to like the theaters and asking for a ticket for Her Smell?
2 for Her Smell, please.
Yeah. Also, the title does actually reference something very, very specific, and it was really cool. Yeah, it's a really good movie if you like punk rock.
All right. My homework this week is a return of a very specific activity in the game Destiny. And that is called Trials of Osiris. And now what this is it's a 3v3 elimination game in which you have to win 7 straight matches on what's called a card, right? You get a card. If you win 7 matches, you get a trip to a special area, and you get special cosmetics and special weapons and the best weapons in the game and blah, blah, blah. Andy, I will not be playing Destiny Trials because it would require me to sink so much more time into it than I actually have. What I want to recommend, though, is that when that game mode finally does come out, it's one of the most fun and enjoyable things to watch a streamer do. The best streamers, they will have raffles, say, hey, get a raffle. We'll give it 3 shots to win 7 straight games. And my personal favorite is this guy, Real Crafty. There are plenty of streamers out there who carried the fire for Destiny while Trials was happening. It's coming back. I have no interest in playing, but I do have interest in watching. So I will be tweeting about it and keeping up with it when it finally happens, when it finally does come back, and I think a week and a half. But my homework is for you, if you're interested in high level, watching video gameplay, watching people do trials, carries is really, really great.
Ariel, I was only laughing because I literally earlier today, a colleague of mine was trying to get me to dump countless hours into Destiny.
Yeah, it's a fun game, but in order to get good enough to hit that level, it would require way too much time.
Yeah.
All right. That's our homework for this week. We're going to continue to work on our Supernatural Spring. Andy and I have a bunch of ideas for ways we're going to change the direction of the show, side episodes, bonus episode, things like that. But before we get out of here,
it's coming. It's going to happen. Cats.
Something is going to happen with cats. I will not be a part of it. Andy, where can people find you online?
You can find me online on Twitter and Letterboxd at Hebrews Pale Ale.
Or you can find me at Dread Pirate Rod. You can find us at Geek 101 Podcast on Twitter and Facebook and Patreon. Email us geek101pod@gmail.com. That's the way for today. Class dismissed.